Hi, I'm Paul Farren. Welcome to our Film Ireland podcast. We interview American cinematographer, camera operator and director Nick McLean. His new book, Nick McLean Behind the Camera, co-written with Irish film writer Wayne Byrne, delves into his experiences working on some of the most famous films of the 70s and 80s, as well as his friendship and collaboration with Burt Reynolds. Nick took time out from his well-earned retirement to give a taster of what you can expect when you read this entertaining memoir.
The book is fantastic.
You know, the book sold out already?
Really?
Yeah, you can't. It says like 3 days ago, it's not available anymore. I guess they're restocking it.
That's fantastic. I hope it keeps up.
Must have gone pretty fast.
Well, tell me this now. I know, but tell our listeners, our viewers, how the book came about, how you got in touch with Wayne.
Somehow I got an email or a message or something from Wayne, and we decided to hook up and talk about Burt Reynolds because he was doing a book on Burt Reynolds, and Burt was one of my best friends. So I said, absolutely. And we talked a couple times, and then Wayne said he looked into my background, and he's wondering if I'd be okay or I'd be, okay with doing a book on myself, co-authoring a book on myself because of my, so many things he didn't know I'd done, which I've done a few. So that's how it got started.
Again, you're being modest again. You've done way more than a few. I'll be able to boast to my children that I talked to the man who filmed Goonies, and they were.
Do you know, Paul, that of all the big movies I've done, I swear to God, Goonies is by far gets more publicity. And now there's a whole new generation. The kids around 8 years old and 10 years old. It goes about every 10 years, but it's huge now. My next door neighbor is a huge rock star. I don't know whether you've ever heard of the Plain White T's, but he's the lead singer of the Plain White T's, and it's what started him on his career. He's about 40 years old, but he said the first time he saw Goonies, that's when he really got interested in doing stuff, performing. And he and Dylan and I are going to the Goonies 35th anniversary in January if they have it. They might not have it because of the virus, but it exploded, that picture.
How did you get involved with that picture?
Totally lucky. Dick Donner asked me in to read the script, and I went in and read the script, and he gave me. First, we started talking about Tahiti. We'd both been to Tahiti. We talked about that, and he handed me the script, and he said, "When you get a chance, read it." So I went out in my car. I read it entirely. I walked back in, and I told Dick's secretary, Jenny, I said, "I've read the script," and he overheard me. And he said, "You read the script already?" And I said, "Yep." And he to the room, asked me a couple of questions, and he said, "Welcome, Goonies." It was that fast, I swear to God.
So how did you find that as being a Spielberg Donner production? That must have been a bit tough because Spielberg was hands-on.
I did Sugarland Express with him when he was 25 years old. I did Close Encounters with him. So I've known him since he was a kid. And he might have even been the one that recommended me to Donner. So I was going in with pretty good credentials.
Your stepfather and his father were filmmakers, and I think your grandfather was an effects man as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was did the first background screens, like blue screen and that, but they were, I can't think of the name of them there, but you shoot them from behind, put a picture on that. And he was one of the originators. I think he actually got an Academy Award for that also. And he was also the second or first president of the ASC, which is the American Society of Cinematography. So he was right in there. I came out of a good group.
When did you get the desire to get behind the camera?
I think because my whole family was in it, and I thought I was going to be a professional athlete, but didn't quite make that. And so I took a class at USC in cinema, University of Southern California. And about a month into the class, I knew that's what I wanted to do. It was just what I liked and what I wanted to do. So my career kind of pointed that way in the future.
You would have done something quite phenomenal in the 60s as a camera operator, in that you did a thing called Handheld in studio.
Yes, I did. In fact, I did one of the first handheld sequences in Close Encounters. And Spielberg, in those days, you never did it. And Spielberg tried to talk me into it. And it was the scene in a press conference when they'd seen flying saucers. Yes, and they were talking about it. And so Steven said, would you be okay with operating, handheld? I said, yeah, if we do the whole sequence handheld, let's do it. Let's try it. So we didn't know whether it was all going to be, but it looked good. It looked like a press conference. And before, they'd never done that before. It was always, on a tripod or.
Well, it was up there with no-nos, like flare in the lens, wasn't it? It was like sacrosanct.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And when I was at Universal as an assistant, they used to send around memos that if you have a flare in the lens, you could be fired. And then, a year later, it was worth another $1,000 a week to get a flare in your lens,
And it wasn't easy to do either. And as I said, like the damage you could do if you didn't do it properly was pretty.
Exactly. You could wipe out the whole scene for sure.
And worked a lot with Vilmos.
I did probably 10 or 12 pictures with Vilmos. And yeah, he was my mentor, I would say. So it was on a picture called Red Sky at Morning, Jimmy Goldstone directed, in Santa Fe. Vilmos could barely speak English. And, he drove an old Studebaker. And, most people kind of made fun of him. I could kind of see he was going in a whole different direction. So I tried to be as nice as I could to him and befriended him. And about halfway through Red Sky at Morning, he says, I've just been contacted, because his dailies were incredible, much better than anything back in Hollywood. And he said, I've just been contacted to do another movie in Canada, if you'd be interested. And it's with a no-name director by the name of Robert Altman. Nobody knew Altman at that time. So we went up and did McCabe and Mrs. Miller after that. And in the middle of McCabe and Mrs. Miller, MASH came out. So then Altman became a big star. But, we did 2 or 3 like that where, we were just up and coming cinematographers and camera operators. And, we lucked out and got the best directors of those times.
And of course, he was bringing that very European style that was.
Yeah, in fact, if you see the opening scenes, interior scenes of McCabe Mrs. Miller, it's black inside, damn near. You can see what you're looking at, but it's not like the old Hollywood that was,
Yeah. You said a really interesting thing in the book about the fact that things came around in the 70s. It was a lot more experimental, and you were seeing very experimental blockbusters, but with the look and the stories. But as you said, you could shoot silhouettes and no one was going to get scared, whereas the 80s came along and everyone was getting overlit again. The studio had a bit stronger a hold.
It was great doing silhouettes and all that kind of. In fact, at the end of Sugarland Express, it was practically all silhouette against the river, the Rio Grande River there.
What a beautiful looking film.
It's incredible. It really is.
Tell me some of the other films that you did with Vilmos.
I did, let's see, McCabe and Mrs. Miller. I did The Rose. I did The Deer Hunter. I did, I can't think of a bunch of them now that we did. Cinderella Liberty, we did. Yeah, Hal Ashby and I became real good friends on Being There. Hal was just the greatest. He was a terrific guy.
And who were you operating for on that one?
On Being There, Caleb Dagenel.
Okay.
Who went on to be, probably to this day, is still one of the best cinematographers in Hollywood. But in those days, he was like 25 years. He was a real young guy, and everybody wanted to trust him. So Hal gave him that job on Being There. And of course, he did a brilliant job, as he does in everything.
What was Hal Ashby like to work with as a director? Because everyone always said that he came from editing and he tended to direct like an editor. Do you think is that true?
He did come from editing, but he was an excellent director. He knew really what he wanted, how to shoot. In fact, at dailies, he'd have 2 projectors. And as soon as the master camera on one, you have 8 takes on the master camera. As soon as he had what he wanted on that, let's say take 2 or take 3, just tell him to shut off that projector and put up the close-up projector. So we did all that. So he was editing in his mind, and he was really good, real good.
Yeah, we've made a few favorites of mine. I love Harold and Maude.
Oh, I do too. Good God Almighty! In fact, their art director, Michael, God, I can't think of Michael's last name, but he was with us on Being There, and was with Hal a long time. But
How did Ashby get on with Sellers?
well, everybody got along with Peter. In fact, when we first got on there, we were told not to wear any purple or have any pencils on the set because Peter hates that. And I became real good friends at the end towards Peter. I said, "What's this shit about you don't like purple or pencils?" He said, "There's no truth to that. I love purple." He said, "Somebody was giving you a bill of goods there." But he was great. But he knew he was, he had a bad heart. And we shot in one stage back at Sam Goldwyn's studios where he'd had the first heart attack. So he freaked out there, and we had to wrap which I can understand that. But what he had, they could fix now. They just couldn't fix it in those days.
Yeah. Let's talk about Burt Reynolds. I mean, Burt was pivotal in you becoming a cinematographer initially. I think you would have become one anyway. But he's the one who went, I'm going to make you a cinematographer. Tell us about that.
We were on Sharky's machine, and we were shooting a 1,000mm lens across this kind of a hotel into this gal Hooker's room. And we were just talking while they were lighting it up over there. And we were talking about Vilmos, as a matter of fact. And we said, he was talking about Vilmos on Deliverance, how great he was. And I said, well, Vilmos made me a camera operator many years ago. And Burt was leaving the room, and he turned around and he looked at me and he says, well, I'm making you a cinematographer, and just walked out of the room. And at the time, I was had a real good friend of his. I told him, he said, he doesn't lie about that kind of stuff. And 8 months later, there's a knock right on this door, and there's Universal sent a script over to Stroker Ace. It was my first movie. Moving from camera operator to DP on a major feature with a major star, it just didn't happen.
As a camera operator, you were a relied upon a camera operator, which is a big deal.
I was, and I did a couple with John Schlesinger too, who's English, and he relies totally on the camera operator. So they work much closer with the camera operator than the DP. So I did a lot of big stuff as a camera operator. Again,
I watched Marathon Man again there recently. Favorites, and that fight scene is phenomenal.
That fight scene, it was my first day on the job, believe it or not, and I asked John if I could do it. And he said, yeah, try it. And Conrad Hall, was the cinematographer on that, and he just let me go with it. And then by the next day, I was in dailies. I was a hero, so I was already starting out pretty good.
And the jump to cinematographer, was it scary for you, or do you think you'd learned enough and you were just putting things to practice?
Very scary. And like I've told my kid and other friends who try and move up, a lot more than you think you know. Once you get in there and you get the ball, you're scared to death. And, Stroker Ace was 90% exterior, which, I could do with my eyes closed now. But every morning when my assistant would come back talking to the lab and I'd be scared to death. I didn't know what was on the negative, so it takes a while to get into that stuff.
Yeah, but it's like you can't fight with the sky.
Right, that's right.
So brought your skills to TV series, Evening Shade.
Over 100 episodes of that, and I didn't want to do it because of it being a sitcom, but Burt had given me so much work and that I did it, whether I wanted to do it or not. But about 6 months into the thing, I loved it. I absolutely, you only work 3 days a week, and they pay you for four weeks, and you work 3 weeks all year. So, and I had my own dressing room. It was great. It was very easy to do, but it was worthwhile. And Burt directed about half of those Evening Shades.
Okay, I didn't even know that. I like that show. I thought it was great fun.
It was good. A lot of good actors.
But it kind of raised the bar a little about what a sitcom was. I think there was a little evolution going on in the 80s that things like Taxi and Cheers and all that did.
Yeah.
But Evening Shade had a few more locations, didn't it? It wasn't as one location bound, was it?
Yeah, no, we had like 4 major sets, but we went out quite a bit. We went out, like one or half a day a week we do exteriors, which is pretty unusual in a sitcom.
And tell me this, your favorite job behind the camera? DOP, operator, director? Which did you like the best?
I think overall as a DP, but I think my biggest, best deal was being there as being the camera operator, and with Peter and Hal Ashby. And it was just a great story. And the guy that wrote it was with us, Jerzy Kaczynski, who later committed suicide. But it was just a all around great deal. And we were back in Washington, D.C., and then the mansion in it was in Asheville, North Carolina, and the biggest house in the United States. It was the Vanderbilt mansion, and it was huge, absolutely huge. And it was haunted, which I really loved.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful story. It's a kind of one-off. Yeah. Didn't you shoot Heaven Can Wait?
I did up until the last 3 or 4 days, and I got fired on it. And it was...
Yes, I remember that story from the book.
Yeah, and Fraker fired me. And then he hired me back later on another one. I can't remember what it was on. And then he actually asked me to shoot. He directed The Lone Ranger, and he asked me to shoot that. So it was kind of his bad, but he had to fire me or he was going to look bad. So, but the interesting part about that is I left Heaven Can Wait, and Vilmos and I had a place up in Vancouver, and I just thought I'd go up there and drink wine and think about things. The first day I got up there, our caretaker came and he said, it's in the book that you just got a call from Thailand. Vilmos wants you to get over on the deer hunter. So I wasn't without a work more than about a day or so.
But as a camera operator, you were highly in demand anyway. I mean, you also shot aerial photography was a speciality of yours. When was the first time you did
I did a lot of that.
And did you enjoy it? It's just terrifying work.
It is terrifying, and I'm afraid of heights like crazy, but for some reason in a helicopter.
You're a very brave man.
In a helicopter looking through a lens, for some reason I have no fear. And I don't know what it is. But if I take my eye out of the camera, I don't want to look down. Is
it not something to do with that fantastic madness of making a film? There's no room for anything else but make the movie.
Yeah, it could be.
I think Ken Russell said there's nothing more powerful word in the world on a set than action.
Yeah, you're right about that. Sure.
I just amazed it took you so long to come around and write your own book. Was it just simply the fortitude of meeting Wayne that made it happen?
I think, to be very honest with you, about a year before, I was having lunch with some people, and they said, you have to write a book. So I tried, and I sat down in here, and when I would write something, it would look like a fifth grader, honestly. It was just, I didn't write. So it was one of my drawbacks. So when Wade gave me the opportunity, I went, cool. And with his knowledge of film and his love of film, which I found out later when I came to Ireland, Jesus, I've never seen a bigger film fanatic than him. And he knows an awful lot about it. He's amazing. He absolutely is amazing.
An amazing trip around Ireland. I think, was you surprised by the kind of the meeting all the people? Did you expect
I had no idea. And in fact, in my mind, I thought Dublin was a little tiny town with thatched roofs. Jesus, it's like New York City. But once we got out, it was incredible. We had a ball. And my grandson and my son love Guinness as much as I do. So we had a wonderful trip.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time out. It's lovely to see you again. Hello to all the family, and I hope the book sells out again and again.
Thank you very much, and the same to you and yours.